everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Talks at Google in partnership with Trans at Google. My name is Abhinav Kishore, and I lead the Google Cloud SMB business in India. Our guest speaker today, Neysara, is someone whose personal journey and advocacy for trans rights in India has thoroughly inspired me. She has also founded Transgender India, an online platform for transgender and non-binary people from all over India. Neysara started the first ever trans-specific online discussion forum in India called Talk, which allows trans people around the country to question and discuss issues about gender, life, career, and transition. Talk helps establish people-to-people connection between transgender people who are otherwise often isolated. She's currently producing a Hindi infotainment show on YouTube called Kamala's PG. Kamala's PG discusses gender transition in India in a really fun and entertaining way. Neysara is also Vital Voices Global Freedom Exchange Fellow and a Vital Voices 100 Women Leader. And with that, a very, very warm welcome to you, Neysara. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Abhinav. Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, and thank you for having me.
Neysara, it's our honor and pleasure to have you today. Let's dive in. Neysara, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, because some elements of this can be so deeply personal, can you tell us about your journey of exploring your gender identity and how you derived the confidence to express it in a conservative society like ours?
Yeah, it has been a deeply personal journey, and especially for something like our identity, as our gender identity. This was something that I knew from very beginning. At a very early stage in my life, like probably one of the first things that I realized about myself was my gender identity. I didn't know how to label it. What is it? I didn't know that. But still, it's something I knew. I would connect to certain people. I would associate myself with certain people and not with certain people. And this was based on gender. And but as a child, you also realize it is not a safe space for you to come out. Yeah, because this social stereotype that we have of gender is so pervasive. Even a child of 4 or 5 can realize it's not a safe thing to express. Yeah, so I tried to hide myself, because even as a child, I tried to hide those behaviors of mine that would stereotypically be not associated to my birth gender. Yeah. And then I, even in school or college, I hid my gender identity just to finish my education. Otherwise, I would not finish my education. So that was difficult. But it was also quite interesting, because though we try to suppress it, we find our tribe. Yeah. So even in my college school, I found other people who were like me. They were from the community, not trans per se, but LGBTQ community. So it was isolating, but not very isolating. We somehow, as children as well, we know to find our tribe. So then I finished my studies. And even when you find your tribe, you're still scared to, even because this is in early 90s that I'm talking about. I'm quite old now. So it was a taboo to be trans, or to be gay, or to be anything other than normal, that what you call. So even to the friends who I now know are gay or lesbian or anything, we didn't tell each other about, our identities, what we feel like. We were too scared to even blurt out to the tribe we called our own. Yeah. And but I knew I was trans, because probably when I was 10 or so, I'd seen a TV commercial, not a commercial, but a TV news, that somewhere, in some Western country, it was presented very grossly. A man had become a woman. And the moment I saw that, I knew it was me. This is what I wanted to become. This is what I associate myself with. I did not understand the complexities that come with this journey. As a child, 10-year-old child, it was just, it's just one surgery, and then you become what you want to be. Slowly I learned about it, and around when I was 23, that's around 2006, I finished my studies and I came out to my family, and that was traumatic. That was mm, life changing for me, because it was too shameful for my family to have me around, or to even accept that I could be trans, because for them, then being trans meant being not human. Yeah. And it went so much so that I feared being killed by them. So I had to run away from my family, and I stayed 2 years under a burqa, just to protect myself, because I didn't know to go to any other city than my own. Yeah. And this is this is a city I knew best. So I lived there, but in a burqa, hiding from my family. I transitioned. And then after I transitioned, the new struggle began. Who am I? Who am I? I am this person living in this land called India, like any other animal would do, but I do not have any legal existence in this country. Uh, can I prove that I'm Neysara? Can I prove that I'm my previous identity that I owned? Can I prove the degrees that I earned, the skills that I owned, the work experience I had garnered were mine? No one would believe that. So that became a struggle. I went to tremendous a lot of interviews, but everywhere I would pass the interview rounds, and then comes the document verification round. Just give us one document that proves you're not a terrorist, you're Indian, you are a human. And I could not provide that. And then I knew I could not find a job. I started a business, and thankfully the business worked out. And then, yeah, I moved to Netherlands in 2018, and since then I've been living here. That's a short story about me. I'm sorry it took a lot of time.
No, this is so moving to hear, Nesra, and there are so many more questions that I want to ask you. But one of the first themes that you touched on as you were speaking about your school and your college life, you spoke about finding people like yourself, and that can be so tough, finding allyship even within the community, and that's what you're doing now with Transgender India. So tell us a little bit more about Transgender India, the genesis, and what's the mission of the organization. Are you seeing it land a meaningful change already in some ways?
Yeah, as I told you, that we find our community somehow, but even I was scared to even speak out to people whom I knew that were safe, until I came out to everyone. I didn't even speak to my tribe, my community. So it is, though we find our community, it's very isolating. We are so scared. This is something I often say. The first person we ever come out to is Google. We search transgender in India. So that's something that's so true. And yeah, and so for us, we started the activities of Transgender India around 2011. And when I transitioned and I put myself out there, there were a lot of people reaching out to me just for basic questions, like which doctor to visit, can I meet another trans person in my city, or and how do I legally change my gender? Because at that time, there was no formal process to do anything. Even now, there is no formal process. It's all DIY for everyone. But then it was sometimes you had to forge your identities. And for me also, I had to do something like that. So, yeah, so there were a lot of questions that trans people would have, and no answers to them. We were all doing it DIY. So what became important is this collective knowledge that we all have, but it's not presented anywhere. So initially we started talking to people one-on-one. It was the telephone ages, and we were talking to people. And I never thought I was building something like Transgender India. I was just helping out a friend, and helping out a friend whom I'd never met. But that's where it started. And then for us, it always became a mission to connect people, because we saw, anytime I met a trans person, it was quite quite a quite a nice feeling for me, because this was the very first time this trans person was meeting another trans person, and that, that makes opens up so much possibilities for them. Like, okay, this is possible. And there are a lot of questions for people. uh, is it possible for a person like me, of a certain age, certain marital status, certain socioeconomic strata? So all those questions, we slowly started answering. So in 2015, we built our Transgender India website, but and we started something called as talk, because we were answering a lot of questions, but there was no one place where this can be reused. So in 2015, we started Transgender India Talk, because we wanted to reuse the information that we produce. And that's how talk began. And over the time, it has become this knowledge hub that we use. Most Anytime you ask a trans person has a question, if they search and talk, they have an answer for it. And also they find a community within their who is trans within their own cities, and that's something beautiful, I think. But throughout this journey, we have felt a strong need to connect to the people who do not speak English, because that becomes a barrier, right? Because most of the times we are so much in this English speaking wokeness that we forget that only 10% of our country speaks English. So that's when we realized that we have to produce more Hindi content or vernacular content, and we were able to do it this year. So we do an infotainment show called as Transgender India, Kamala's PG, where we try to talk about various issues about transition, which is not mainstream. Because in mainstream, we see a lot of tokenism, like the first police officer, the first doctor. But what about the second and the third? So that's what we do with Transgender India's Kamala's PG currently.
That's amazing. If I can ask, Neysara, there's so much awareness and education that's happening within the transgender community. But what about the understanding that our wider society has and the wider acceptance for the trans community within India? Is that something that you're seeing is already evolving or changing, or if there's a lot that needs to be done to change that? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think from where I started, I see a lot of changes, but I also see these changes in the tier 1 or tier 2 cities. In When you go to beyond these places, the situation is still, as the societal mindset is still as it was 15 years ago when I transitioned. I know people who run out of their families. I know people who have death threats from their families. So the change is quite slow, though we see a lot of tokenism happening. That first, in a way, it is also inspiring for people to have tokenistic representations, but it is not really helping people in a way that they have to go. It's not helping people in a way that it is making things easier for them. It is telling them that it is possible, but it is not making it easier for them. Still, for a trans person starting out, it is quite difficult. And what I would like to see in the society is where coming out is not an issue. Coming out to someone as trans is not an issue. You don't have to think as much. Right now, what happens is, when even to the first person, when we come out, the closest friend or the closest ally, we come out. We think for years before we come out. We are quite sure. And even when we have thought for years and we come out to someone, the question is, are you sure? Maybe it's not that. No, I've thought about it for years before I could even word it out. Yeah. So that societal mindset has to change. And there's a lot of good initiatives taken currently to help trans people. Like there is periphery that provides jobs for transgender people, because I feel economic empowerment of transgender people is very important, because that gives the possibility for them to exist within their own gender. So I think there are a lot of small initiatives taken, but still there's a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything that you spoke about, like economic empowerment, societal acceptance, there's so much of a context of the laws and policy of the land that influence these factors, right? So from a policy and legal perspective, Neysara, what would you say are the top focus areas that should enable the trans community going forward?
Yeah, I think one basic need the trans community has is to get their identity back. Like the way I told you, when I finish my transition, how do I prove these skills that I've earned, or these experiences or job experiences, or the attributes that belong to me are mine? So this is the basic that we need for everyone. We need to prove that we are Indian people. We need to prove that we are people first and for all. That is something that is so difficult for people with transition. And I think what the one ground thing that I would want is that process of changing your gender identity, or reclaiming your identity, reclaiming your place in society, in a legal context, that is easier. Because right now what we have is, previously people would forge their identities. Then came a time where they would go to Delhi and do something called as gazette notification. That is, everyone from such a big country have to go to this one particular spot in the country called gazette office in Delhi, and they would have to register, publish their name change there. So that would enable them to get their identity back. But again, if you see, that's such an inconvenient process, especially for people who do not have the means to. Yeah, and most trans people do not have the means to go to Delhi, just do these things. So that was a phase, and now we have new laws, but the new laws are not very clear, and also they are not very easy for everyone to understand. So we need a lot of awareness within the bureaucracy, and within the government systems, and also within the transgender people. So that's what we are trying to do for the transgender people. We are making content, how to get your passport, how to get your Aadhaar card, or voter ID back, or your educational skills back. So that is the basic, I feel. Other than that, there's also a huge need to include, to build more professionals that help transition and transgender people. For example, lawyers, because we need lawyers, right, who can help us do these procedures, because these are beyond a normal person's understanding how to about various aspects of life. Lawyers who are educated in gender transition, or doctors, I think it should be included in the educational curriculums, at least in the specialization level. For example, someone is going to be a psychiatrist, but they do not study much about gender transition or gender how to diagnose gender dysphoria. There is no diagnosis as such, but how to deal with a patient who has gender dysphoria, or with an endocrinologist, or people, at least people who specialize in these fields. I think it's important that they know how to deal with transgender people. So I think these, because there's such a huge shortage for specialists who can help transgender people. If I, for a country as big as India, if I have to count trans friendly doctors, I could count in one hand, just one hand. I don't need the second one. If you ask me, suggest some trans friendly doctor, psychiatrist in India, I could do this. Trans friendly endocrinologist India, again this. So I would want more of specialists who can help transgender people, because India is a big country. We are a human. We have a lot of people living in our country, and a lot of them are trans. And these handful of doctors cannot help them. So we need more qualified professionals who can help transgender people. And also in the government setups, like the government hospitals, we need doctors and professionals who are sensitive towards transgender people. So these are the major things I feel. Other than that, I think even in the school systems, how do you sensitize? Because a lot of us face bullying or harassment within hid my gender identity when I was a kid. Not everyone can. Even when I hid it, parts of it did come out. It's not something that I can hide completely. Parts of it does seep out through the cracks, and based on that, I was harassed, I was bullied. Now, not everyone can hide their gender identity similarly. So we need more anti-bullying, anti-ragging laws in schools, and more sensitization for children. So I think these are the things that I would like to see come first for transgender people. And also, right now we also have one law within the trans policy that we have currently, the Transgender Protection Act. That is, if any sexual violence is perpetrated against people like me, then the maximum punishment the perpetrator can get is 2 years. But that makes me terribly unsafe to be in India. I do not want to be in a place where I know certain things can happen with me, but the perpetrator can legally get away with it with uh, a 2 years of imprisonment. Or it's not the length of penalty that uh, mm, I'm talking here, but the disparity among against with me and a cisgender woman, that the penalty disparity that is alarming for me. So these are some of the things that I would like to see change in the with the policy that we have in India.
And couldn't agree more, Nesra. It's a very, very long road ahead with so much for us to cover. The one thing that I've noticed is that your work has taken you on a global stage now. You are a Trans Amsterdam ambassador. You're featured in the very prestigious Vital Voices art exhibition. Do you think having a global voice for trans rights in India can really make a difference to the landscape that we have here? And have you seen that difference kind of come through?
Yeah, I think this is a global movement. Trans emancipation is a global movement, and it is something that we learn. The trans community is not localized to one culture or one tradition, or though as much as we in India would like to call it as a Western influence, it's not. We've had gods who are transgender. We have Ardhanarishwars in every culture and in every tradition. Historically, trans people have existed. So there is a huge opportunity to learn from each other. And in every culture where trans people have existed, they have been marginalized also over the course of time. And some societies have tried to some trans communities in some societies have tried to have sort of emancipated themselves. So there's a lot to learn from each other, how they sensitize their societies, how they reach the place that they did reach. It's not like there is one country that is trans Ethiopia that's not there yet. That would take a long time. But still, there's a lot to learn from each other. And in that way, it helps me to understand the struggles and what can be done. And I think it is important for also trans people to have role models, because right now there are many, not just me. I'm not telling I'm the only one. Right now there are many role models. So in a way, it also helps for the trans community to have role models. And for a very long time, we didn't. When I was young, when I was a child, I didn't know any trans person who was not on the streets. Yeah. But right now, uh, uh, people like me and people also in community do exist, that people can see, okay, this person did transition and they're not on the streets. Yeah. So in that way, it helps for the trans community. But also, I think it is it is a lot of learning from each other. When you are on a global stage, you meet people who have taken the trans emancipation ahead in their countries. So it's a lot of learning from each other, and also building a network and gaining strength from each other. So I think it helps.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that there's probably no country in the world that has gotten it entirely perfect just yet, but is there some part of the world that you think we could look up to or learn from in terms of trans rights and societal equity? Is there some country that's doing better than us and we can pick from them?
Yeah, than us, many. Yeah, but yeah, as I told you, no country is perfect, and it's there is at this point in time there is no place in this world where I would say it's complete equality between men and women or trans and cis people. So that does not exist. But still, I think Western Europe, for that matter. I'm not picking one country as such, but Western Europe and Nordics are quite ahead with this journey. I can give you one example of it. So when I moved to Netherlands, I moved because of my marriage, and um, so yeah, when I came here, most of my documents were not easy to change. I would still have a lot of documents that are that were in my previous identity, like my birth certificate, which you require here to register a marriage. So I come here with a birth certificate that is of my previous identity, and I show it. I give it to the person who's on the general municipality marriage registration office, and I bet you this is not a person in the ministerial level or someone who's able to make that decision, who at least in India is qualified to make those decisions. But this is just an officer in the wedding office, and the person looks at it, and then I'm super scared that this person will say, no, this certificate doesn't belong to you, this is someone else, because it is of a different person, it is of a different identity that way. So the person looks at it, and then the person says, okay, these are different. But then I tell her that, yeah, look at my other documents there, none of them prove that that is mine. And then I explain the situation to her, and then within 5 minutes she's okay with it. There are no questions asked. So that's something I find it amazing, but especially with Western Europe. There's a huge immigrant crisis, and a lot of things happening with outsiders coming in, and there's a lot of fear that way, I would say. But still, just to see these two documents that belong to different people, and say, okay, I trust you. I trust you, what you've gone through, what you've been through, and I'm happy that you're here. And yeah, so I found that interesting. and also nice of that person. And but still, even here, I see problems, especially in societal acceptance of trans people. Again, when we say LGBT, it's a spectrum, right? We have some emancipations that have happened ahead of some other emancipations, especially LGB emancipation and T emancipation. Here, the LGB emancipation, it's quite okay to be gay. Not, I would not say it's perfect, but still better than being trans. But still, when you come out as trans to families, it is difficult. It is a process that you have to think about. You have to make backup plans about. You have to uh, make. It takes years before you come out to someone. So, for me, Ethiopia would be a world where you don't have to think of consequences just to be yourself. You can come out the day you realize that you are trans or you have doubts about yourself. And that is Ethiopia for me here. And that we have, I think we'll take some time to reach there.
That's really insightful, Nesra. At this point, I do want to remind all our viewers that if you have questions for Nesra, and I'm sure all of you have many questions, please put them in the comment chat box and we'll pick up those questions in the next few minutes as soon as we are done chatting with her. But getting back, Nesra, there's so much that you're doing with the show that you're producing on YouTube, with your Transgender India platform, with the talk community. Does it feel like a lonely battle at sometimes? Does it feel like you're doing too much and you're powering through? Who are the individuals, organizations who are motivating you? Who are your allies? That's what we'd love to know.
Yeah, it does feel lonely, but also in today's world, more crazy than lonely, especially with all the social media that it puts up in front of you. So it is a crazy journey, and it also, yeah. So it's important you disconnect from everything for some time, just for your mental peace and mental health, because the social media that we have currently is quite anxiety generating also. There's so much put up on your face, and it's in that way it is quite crazy, I would say, not lonely. It is yeah, with deriving strength, it's important to have to choose a family that loves you, to choose a family that gives you cares for you. So that chosen family that I've made around myself uh, keeps me grounded, and also enables me to fly. So it's important over the course of our life that we choose people who allow us grow, who allow us to be ourselves. And that's hugely important for me, to have people who nourish me around me. And I think that's important for everyone, and it's also mutual. We do yeah, I reciprocate the same emotions to people around me. So in that way, it's important to love your to surround yourself, or to choose a family that helps you grow. And the organizations wise, I think one there are couple, there are many that I look up to, and the work they do. So Vital Voices, for example, the work they do for women is amazing. I mean, beyond words. And in India, especially, organizations like Periphery, or there's so many organizations like Tweet Foundation, and other organizations. The work they do is also a collaborative, I would say, because one thing I realized long ago when we were running Transgender India, there's so much to be done. There's so much to be done, and not everything can be done with one person or one organization. It is a collaborative space, and how we collaborate and help each other and help the community to rise up and to ask for more equity is important. And in that way, when we collaborate with other organizations, other individuals, that gives me strength. That also makes me realize that it's possible for us to do it together. So I think the collaborative forces that we have around Transgender India is a huge plus that we have. Yeah.
That's amazing. The one thing, Neysara, while a lot of this, there's a lot of advocacy and there's almost like this big battle that you're fighting out there. Are there incidents that give you hope? Is there something around you that makes you feel like, we'll still make this happen and that things could actually take a positive turn in the next few years? Would love to hear if there's an anecdote or two that you would want to share with us.
Yes, I think there's a lot of hope, especially the young people. And they want, the young today want more. They want more of rights for themselves, more equality. They do not want anyone to discriminate themselves. And the energy they bring into this fight is amazing. I wish I was that that energetic 15 years ago. So I think there's a lot of hope, and especially the young that we see currently come out. There's so many people, I mean, reaching out to us, and so that gives me a lot of hope. And also the way these young are shaping the culture. They're demanding the content creators to make more trans friendly or LGBT friendly content. They're asking for more, and that is huge, a huge sense of hope for me. And I hope, and this again is in the tier 2 cities, tier 1 or tier 2 cities, but this culture that is being changed in tier 2 and tier 1 cities is also slowly spreading its wings to other villages and cities. So people will ask for more, and it is a change that no one can stop. So I'm quite hopeful for the future.
That's amazing. As you mentioned, young people, Neysara, the one thought that crossed my mind is that within the broader trans community, there could be so many possible intersectionalities, right? Age is just one intersectionality, but there's religion, socioeconomic status, what part of the world you live in, intersectionality with other elements of LGBT plus spectrum. How do you view those intersectionalities, and have you seen a need to address those?
Yes, it is, because being trans is one aspect of your personality, but there's so many other that can make you push you deeper and push you down. So I think that's the reason we are trying to make, for example, with Kamala's PG, what we are trying to do is we are trying to uh, reach out to people who cannot speak English, because that's also a privilege, right? That you can speak English, because speaking English gives you access to the world, understanding understanding written literature in English enables you to do a lot of things. So there's a myriad of oppressions that come over top of each other. For example, English, or even being able to concentrate for a long time, or being able to understand what is written, or for example, being able to or living in a rural place, or caste. There's so many layers of oppression that one can face. I would say that I come from a background as such. So I somehow, though today I am in a different place, but it is, I understand the oppressions and the layers of intersectionalities, that layers of oppression that can make things more difficult. And it is important, but it is also difficult to peel through and reach. uh, uh, Everyone faces their own struggles, so it's important that we are as inclusive as possible, and also acknowledge the privilege. Sometimes not the privileges that to acknowledge the privileges that we have, even though there are some acquired privileges. uh, so I think it's important that we when we create content or when we reach out to people, we also acknowledge the underprivilegedness, that the loss of privilege that we have to address. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that we try and do here at Google is create like a collective awareness of the different aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we all are at different parts in the journey. If you had to share, Nesra, a few tips with us for what could we do to be better allies, what would those be?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, as we talked about previously, Google is such a place that has it's such a company that has uh, influence in everyone's life today, I would feel. Even like it's interesting because uh, uh, we make on YouTube, right? We produce on YouTube. One of the reasons we produce on YouTube, because we know it YouTube is accessed in the villages in India. We know that it's so it's so penetrative in India. So I think for a company as powerful as Google, it's important to uh, mm, understand to have as less biases as possible. So in that way, I think uh, I there are few things I can tell you, but I think it is important that we. What I can suggest is probably watch more LGBT content that is produced currently, especially that is translated. For example, I can give you an example what I observed for myself. So everyone watched Money Heist, right? La Casa de Papel. So people whom I know who would not support LGBT people, they still supported Helsinki. They still vouched for him. They still didn't want him to get hurt. They were on his side. So I think I believe in the power of infotainment. So I would suggest people to watch a lot of LGBT content, not just Money Heist, where a character uh, is uh, mm, is gay, but more LGBT content where like Pose or so many. But these series also come with a lot of glamour. Don't think every trans life is so glamorous. Most people live difficult lives, and uh, I think it gives us opportunity to live uh, a life that we don't live otherwise. So I would suggest that. And also I would suggest be open to anyone around you being trans. It may be a colleague, but it can also be people within your own family. So how would you want to develop a society that is fair to your own kin, to your own family? So because being trans is not a gene, it's not can happen only in a certain type of people or something. Anyone can be trans. So with coming um, years, more and more of us will come out. So how do you want the society to shape for when it's someone whom you love? So I think it's always important to keep that in mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nisra. And as you were talking and narrating your stories and your experiences, we got comments on our chat that talk about like how sharing your story helps them understand trans people better. And that's something that I would love to acknowledge. I mean, as we spoke over the past 45 minutes, I feel better informed, better educated about the struggles and what is it that we need to change as allies, what needs to happen on the Indian landscape, what needs to happen in policy formation. It's been a very, very insightful discussion, and it's been a true honor and privilege to have you with us, Neysara.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.